Welcome back, my friends, to the half season of TFT Hyperroll, where so much changes, but so much ends up remaining the same. This is now called Glitched Out. We've got some new champions, new traits, new stuff. I'm gonna go over all of it. I don't know exactly how much is glitch and how much isn't, but let me show you the first thing that really seems to matter to me. Notice the item automatically comes off the champion when you get it. I love that change. I hope it's not part of the glitch. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and do all the stuff to help the YouTube algorithm and help the channel grow. I'm going to be bringing you a bunch of videos, probably about 12 over the next couple of weeks. They're all from the PBE, so slightly subject to change. I don't know what they're going to keep, what they're not going to keep, what they're going to change, but it seems pretty static at this point, so I'm pretty confident in these builds I'm going to show you being able to take you through to the next level and get you into Hyper as quickly as possible this season. But before we get into individual builds, let me show you probably one of the biggest changes for this season for Hyperroll, and it is this. Carousel in Hyperroll. Now normally carousels are only in the first part of Hyperroll, the very beginning, and then you don't see them again. But because Glitched Out has these weird ones where you're going to get anvils and eggs and possibly champions with 2 items and things like that, you can get 2 or 3 more carousels throughout the match. I hope this goes away. I hope this is just for this and we never see it again. This is me personally. One of the things I don't like in TFT is the carousel mechanic. One of the things I like about Hyperroll is the fact that there is no carousel mechanic. So, yeah, it's here. We're kind of living with it. So, it's just part of the glitch, and hopefully it goes away at the end of this season. Now let's jump into the new traits and the new builds that come along with them, because they're some of the strongest builds that we have. Infiniteam is the first that I want to go over, and the way it works is once you get 3 Infiniteam members on your team, a little portal will pop open, and then you can put one of your Infiniteam champions on it, and it will be duplicated, and you will end up with a lesser copy of that champion, but they will automatically come with an item. So the amount of items they get will be based on how many augments they have. So early in a game like this, you're going to get, in this case, an additional Shen with 1 item once combat starts, which is pretty good to be getting an extra person on the board who's going to be able to fight for you. That portal is usually either frontline or backline. I like it better when it's frontline because there are more Infiniteam members that are backline champions than there are frontline champions. So when you have it up front, and once you get to 5 Infiniteam members, it'll open 2 portals. It might be front and back, 2 fronts, 2 backs. You don't know until you kind of get there. But it's a little weak frontline, but the backline is really strong and can carry you. And there are multiple ways that you can build that out. One way is to use sure shots. Sure shots are Ashe, Sivir, who is also an Infiniteam, Samira, who would be your ace, and then Ezreal, the 5-cost legendary Ezreal, is also a sure shot. Sure shots work the same way as last season in that they're going to gain additional attack power throughout the match, so the longer the match, the stronger they get. For carries in this build, I usually try to use a combination of Twisted Fate and Samira. Samira being the ace is going to help be a carry, and Twisted Fate is just a very strong unit that can pour out a lot of damage. However, Twisted Fate is also a duelist, so this does not take advantage of Twisted Fate's duelist trait, but as you can see, he can still pour out a lot of damage in this build and keep you alive. And again, since this is Hyperroll, you're going to be able to complete the build without using all of the champion slots. So I like to use additional and put them into the front line, because again, the front line is a little weak since it's just likely going to be Shen and Pantheon up front, which isn't necessarily going to hold you. So I love to try to pick up a Rammus or some other frontline tank that can take over those duties and help carry you. Now I want to move on to build number 2, which is also an Infiniteam build, but let me say one last thing about the first build. It works really well at the start, but it tends to fall off late. I've found it will very reliably get you into the top 4, but wins remain elusive because there are builds like this one I'm about to show you that will ultimately destroy it, and that is the Infiniteam Quickdraw build. Now, Quickdraw is a new trait for this set that works very similar to Rebels from previous sets in that they are going to essentially do an extra attack that goes out after doing 3 attacks. But there's a little more to why this build remains really strong, like unreasonably strong, and that's the fact that it ends up using both Ezreals. Yes, there are 2 Ezreals in this set. There's a 2-cost Ezreal and a 5-cost Ezreal. And we'll get to more about the second Ezreal in a second, but the other thing that makes this particular comp extra strong is that Miss Fortune is the additional Quickdraw that becomes your ace. She still has a team clearing ult, but so does the 5-cost Ezreal. So when you end up with the Infiniteam Quickdraw build, you end up with 2 champions that can essentially wipe the opposing board, and when they work together, it can take an entire team out in just a matter of seconds, and it's really frustrating to be on the opposite side of that, but when you're on this side of it, it's kind of fun to watch happen. I'll be doing more videos drilling down on this, but let me just give you a taste of it. Now, Ezreal is an AD champion, at least the 5-cost version, so you're going to want to build him up with AD when you get the chance. Miss Fortune works the same as last time, but you'll see Ezreal cast all over the board. There they go, back and forth. That is because we're using the 2 Ezreals, and his ult will go everywhere. Miss Fortune can clear the board, and you can wipe a team out just like that. I'm going to do much more on this build with some upcoming videos, but for now, I want to move on to the next build, which also involves a new trait for this season, and that is Riftwalker. Now, this is a really fun trait to play with, but it can be a little risky at times. The way it works is once you have 3 Riftwalkers, which are Pyke, Vex, and Jhin, you will summon a Zac. The power of the Zac will be based on the star level of the champion summoning it. Zac has a second very unique quality which works really well into both of the builds I'm going to show you, and that is that Zac will take on the trait of the Riftwalker that Zac is closest to, which means you can mold your team based around the champion that you're summoning and change it at any time. So let me just show you what I mean in this particular match. I've now found a Jhin, so it's time to put in for the Riftwalker. Put him in, get a Zac. Zac is next to Pyke, so he picks up the Hacker trait. So I now have Hacker, but I'd rather make Zac a Renegade, so I'm going to put Zac near Jhin. Now I have 4 Renegades on the team, which means I'll be able to go up to 5 and get that next level out of it. Your main goal when running this type of build is to use Vex as your carry, so you're going to want a lot of AP items and mana items because Vex can absolutely destroy a team when Vex casts. The other thing is then to pick which way Zac is going to go. In this case, I went Renegade because I had up to now 6 Renegades, so I made Zac the 7th, which gave me a lot of power. You can just add AD items onto Jhin and your team will do very, very well. So I would like to jump over to the other Riftwalker build that I like, although given how versatile Zac is, there are probably lots more combinations that you can do. First and foremost, I want to say, if you get the opportunity to pick up a Riftwalker emblem, just grab it, because that is going to allow you to make Zac much sooner. Also, it will allow you to get to the 3-star gold Zac much easier, because you can then have 4 Riftwalkers that don't all have to be 3-star golds in order to make Zac a 3-star. It has to do with the amount of stars among all of the Riftwalker champions. So that's something to know that you can use to your advantage. So the other combination I like to do is Riftwalker Mascot, and the reason you can pull that off is because Vex is a mascot, and if you put Zac close to Vex, Zac will become a mascot, allowing you to get to the 6 mascots. But in this case, I was using Zac as a defender to keep the front line strong while I built towards the 6 mascots. Now remember, Zac is going to take on the trait of whoever is closest, whichever Riftwalker is closest, I should say, and in this case it was Riven. who is a defender, so Zach became a defender, which allowed me to then have 4 defenders as I was working up towards mascots. You build pretty much the same way in terms of giving Vex all kinds of AP items, and then Jhin AD items. That will be your ultimate backline, and Zach is going to serve as really the meat of your front line. The one downside to the Riftwalker mascot build is that you're reliant on getting Nunu, but once you do, I just want to show you this moment because this is how it all ends up working out. You can bring Nunu into your match, and then once you do, you can take Zach, move down next to Vex, and boom, you have the 6 mascots you need. Now that covers the new traits and the builds I like to use with them, but that is not all there is. They've made some drastic changes to Laser Core. There are now only 5 of them, and one of them is Warwick, who is also an admin. So Laser Core admin becomes a really fun build to make, but I consider it more the race for Warwick, because whoever goes for this build and gets the strongest Warwick first is likely going to end up winning. It also depends strongly on what admin traits you end up getting. When I'm doing an admin Warwick build, I like to try to go with health or healing as the main part of it, and hopefully get hero augments that will build into that. Warwick is really interesting in this set is because he has 2 modes. In basic mode, he has 20% Omnivamp and just attacks. Once he ults, he will then start leaping to people and attacking faster and faster, therefore gaining back more and more health. It's tied a lot to his physical damage, so I tend to use combinations of damage and speed up items. It could be Rage Blade, it could be Titan's Resolve, it could be something like you see here with Rapid Fire Cannon and Bloodthirster and a Hand of Justice, stuff that will give him more power, possibly more room so he doesn't have to get directly up to things, or just more and more speed. But Warwick becomes really, really strong as he goes on, and becomes almost unbeatable when you get towards endgame. The risk with this build is you are likely not the only person who's going to be going for it, and there's also going to be competition for admins because of another build I'll show you in a moment. But if you can make it come together, throw your AP items onto LeBlanc, your AD items onto Warwick, and you will find yourself going very deep into the game, if not winning. Really, really solid way to get into the top 4, and a way to make great use of Warwick's abilities, although there is another build with admin and Warwick that works a little bit differently. This one is going to be admin Brawlers. Now this is not the last admin build. This is very different from last season because admin actually has a lot of uses outside sort of the admin heart build that had it stuck before. But admin Brawler is exactly what it sounds like. And as before, you tend to go with the health ones because Brawler will increase their percentage health, and a lot of the admin traits will add health onto your champions. With stacking health and the Brawler buff, as you can see, you can get some nonsensical looking health bars with really, really strong champions that can hold in for a long time. With the right items on Warwick, he can be absolutely deadly. You can see him just tearing through people here. Now granted, you're not guaranteed to win with this, but it does get you to the top 4 a lot more than you would expect. But the fun doesn't stop there with admin. It's really versatile. We've covered admin Laser, we've covered admin Brawler, well, there's also admin Spellslinger, and even admin Riftwalker, but I'll save that one for another video and just talk about admin Spellslinger, which as you can imagine involves making LeBlanc your carry. My main goal with this, if I get the opportunity, is to go with healing and AP boosts in my admin so that I'm focusing on maximizing LeBlanc's power. Then I try to get at least Star Guardian and Spellslinger as well. If you can work some heart in, it's going to help out, but the real key to this is LeBlanc and her ability to stay alive, which is why the healing is important. Find items like Spear of Sojin so she can cast off in a Hextech Gunblade, and then the Archangel Staff is just fantastic for her because she'll get more powerful as the match goes on. Another build that you might want to give a look to is Duelist with a combination of Vayne and Twisted Fate as your carries. Obviously, you load your AD items onto Vayne and then AP items onto Twisted Fate. I like to add Rageblade as well, so he picks up even more speed, some type of mana generator so he's casting more often, and then a power item like Rabadon's Death Cap or Archangel Staff. Another thing I like about Duelists, as it's currently set in this half, is that they take reduced damage at 6 and 8. When you get up to 6, they're currently taking 10% reduced damage, and if you happen to get an emblem and are able to go to 8, they will be taking 20% reduced damage. So the problem I used to have with Duelists, which was their lack of strength in the front line, kind of dies off when they start taking less damage, and if you can get a Nyla with some lockets, it's really going to help you out. Also, if you can work her in, Annie makes a great addition to this build. She ticks Spellslinger in Twisted Fate, which will allow him a little bit more AP and additional attacks, and will also tick Oxforce for Fiora, which will allow her to stand in a little longer. And remember, they are taking reduced damage at 6, so you're not losing that much if you just stay at 6 and pick up the 2 Oxforce and 2 Spellslingers. It should get you to the top 4 pretty easily. Now I have a few more builds I want to talk about. First, this one, which is very good to use, which is Star Guardian and Spellslingers. It's going to revolve around, you guessed it, Star Guardian and Spellslingers, and often you go ahead and bring in a Morgana, who is a really, really strong unit to just have in the backline and will stun people because she sends out waves that hold them in place while your other champions are able to take them down. But ultimately, you're going to be relying on the new champion Neeko for this set to really be your carry. The way she works is she's going to throw out a spell that is going to bounce to 3 people. So load her up with some AP items, some mana building items, and then some type of heal item. Oftentimes I'll see people use the Hextech Gunblade, and then the Morellonomicon is also good. I tend to like adding in a little extra mana along with the Star Guardian, so she's really able to turn out the damage and carry you to the top 4 fairly reliably. Now, before I get to the final build that I think will help you climb, I want to talk about a build that has kind of disappointed me the most this season, and that's Threats. Threats was one of my favorite builds from last season. You put together all 8 threats and you had a really good team. It wasn't easy to build because you needed to get to 3. But once you got there, it synergized really well. The problem now is there are only 2 3-cost threats, Rammus and Morgana. Cho'Gath is gone, and they don't have a good replacement there for him, so you don't get that initial tankiness. And even once you get all 7 threats together, they just don't seem to gel together the way they used to. It can work if you get really, really lucky, but most of my attempts pretty much ended up like this. Now for the final build, and this is pretty much the most powerful build I have seen because I have won every single time I have done it. It's Animaniacs again. And the only thing that has changed is instead of Zoe, it is now Gnar, who is the 3rd prankster. But it's the straight out same champions, same items, same everything. In fact, in some ways, I think this is even stronger than it used to be because one of the weaknesses of the original Animaniacs with the Zoe build was the front line wasn't quite as strong, so you usually had to make up for it. Well, enter Gnar, who is a pretty natural tank, can do a ton of damage, hold things back, and yeah, it'll just allow the rest of your team to clean up. Once you bring Miss Fortune into it, she's super powerful, she'll wipe a team, and you're going to be in the top 4 pretty much every time. And just as a reminder, your 3 key items for Jinx: Rageblade, Spear of Sojin, Static Shiv. When you get Misfortune, you give her a Rageblade, a Spear of Sojin, some type of damage amplifier, Rabadon's Death Cap or Jeweled Gauntlet, and you'll just win. I'm sorry that it's that simple. I kind of wish they had almost taken this out, but use it, enjoy it, get yourself to Hyper. I think you'll be able to do it in record time this season. I got there really quick in the PBE. Hope you enjoyed this video, you found it helpful, and as always, hope you have an absolutely awesome day.